Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Mohawks of Kahnawake Council is hoping to have their traditional territory returned. They launched a campaign today aimed at drawing awareness to their land claim grievances. The campaign, Still Ours, was announced today in a press conference held in Delson, Quebec, not far from Kahnawake. The press conference was held on traditional Kahnawake territory. Delson is one of the locations within their land grievance claim area. The Grand Chief of Kahnawake, Cody Daibo, says there is approximately 24,000 acres within the land claim grievance south of the island of Montreal. He says it's a key part of the campaign to have the public understand the history of this land claim. The Mohawk Council of Kahnawake launched a website at KahnawakeLandBack.com to promote this awareness. The Grand Chief says the council is also setting up meetings with municipalities where land grievances occur. He says he has reached out to the federal government to address this issue in a meeting, but one has not been set.
We're here to start promoting the education aspect of it. You know, this isn't to be hostile in any way. It's just many wrongs were done in the past and they need to be corrected now. And we're not going to be sitting idly by anymore, waiting for the federal government to wave a wand and it's all going to be corrected. It starts on the ground.
Today marks the one-year anniversary of the Eagle gold mine disaster that took place in central Yukon. The mine, owned by Victoria Gold, is on the traditional territory of the Nacho-Nayakdun First Nation near Mayo. On June 24th, 2024, it experienced what is called a heap leach failure. The failure caused roughly 200 tons of cyanide-contaminated ore to be released into the environment. The First Nation continues to call for a public inquiry into the matter. Victoria Gold was put into a court-ordered receivership after it failed to keep up with government-ordered cleanup work. Its receiver, PricewaterhouseCoopers, plans to sell the mine and its assets by the end of the year. Territorial officials say an independent report on the causes behind the incident will be released sometime next week. Friends, family, and supporters came out to honor the memory of Ashley Murdock as the one-year anniversary of her tragic death approaches. She was from the Fisher River and Jackhead First Nations, but was living in Winnipeg at the time of her murder. Murdock's remains were found in a downtown Winnipeg apartment the morning of July 5th, 2024, just a day before her 28th birthday. Her dream was to become a nurse, and she was the mother of 3 children. Investigators found her body was hidden in the apartment for over a week before being discovered by police. 5 people have been arrested in connection to her murder. At the memorial walk, her mother said ongoing court hearings and investigations have been difficult to endure. She's demanding governments increase financial and emotional supports to Indigenous families mourning murdered loved ones.
And this is where I have to take it upon myself and do that GoFundMe page. I have to reach out like that now, and there's supports out there. So where are they? That's where I'm asking. Bring help already. Stop this already. Stop the families that are survivors. They're hurting. They need help too.
On Friday in Winnipeg, a sweat lodge was unveiled at the Archdiocese of St. Boniface to honor a grandfather rock on its grounds. The lodge was created in partnership with Elder Clayton Sandy and students from Murdoch McKay Collegiate. It's part of the church's efforts to build renewed relationships with the Indigenous community. Sierra Bettens was at the ceremony and has more.
This rock has been the centerpiece of the Archdiocese of St. Boniface Heritage Garden since it was gifted about a decade ago. But Archbishop Albert Legat says it took on a new meaning after a conversation with Elder Mary Cushane a few years ago.
She said, well, in Native spirituality and of several First Nations peoples, the rock has a very, very spiritual, important value. And I asked her, well, tell me more about it.
It became a grandfather rock, and on Friday morning, a sweat lodge was unveiled to honor it. The project was spearheaded last summer after Legat met knowledge keeper Clayton Sandy from the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation.
And last July or August, he called me here and introduced me to the rock, and said that give me the history of the rock, and then asked if I had any ideas what we could do with it, and this is what I came up with.
Students from Murdock McKay Collegiate in Winnipeg built the lodge.
They did the measurements, and then I took them out to my sweat lodge just to look at the whole design.
The students also participated in the sweat, an experience Vice Principal Jordan Yvonne Moreau says was transformative.
This project was always more about learning than just learning about a sweat lodge. For us, it is about learning with and from each other, about learning how to connect, and about learning how we contribute to the community that we're part of.
Around the lodge, panels with teaching in English, French, Dakota, and Anishinaabe share the significance of the grandfather rock and the ceremony.
We call them grandfather rocks. We usually bring about 21 into the sweat lodge, and we heat them up for a couple of hours, and when that water hits that rocks, the grandfathers are giving up their lives to help us heal.
Legat says the Archdiocese has been working to meet the Truth and Reconciliation 60th call to action. It calls on the Church to collaborate with Indigenous spiritual leaders to teach clergy to honor Indigenous spirituality, acknowledge the role the Church played in the residential school system, and prevent future harm.
We needed to apologize, not just the people who ran the residential schools, but as the Church in Canada, in our various dioceses, we needed to know and we needed to apologize to go forward.
Legat says the Archdiocese is also looking to transfer title to some of its land for elders to share teachings and hold ceremonies. Sandy says he's looking forward to continuing their partnership.
This is just part of that journey. And I think the more that we can get in front of people and provide our culture, our history, stories, it should be. It's all about building relationships, eh?
He encourages those in Winnipeg to visit the lodge at 151 Avenue de la Cathédrale. Sierra Buttons, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
There's been a lot of opposition to Bill C-5. Coming up after the break, we'll hear from a group that represents Indigenous businesses and workers in the resource sector who see the legislation as an opportunity. Stick around. Welcome back. The Liberal government's controversial Bill C-5 is being debated by the Senate this week and widely expected to become law. Indigenous peoples have been speaking out against the legislation and the speed with which it is being pushed through. But an Indigenous organization that represents businesses and workers in the resource sector sees this moment as an opportunity. For more, we're joined by John Desjardins, Executive Director of the Indigenous Resource Network. John, thanks so much for taking some time for us here. As you know, there's a lot of opposition to Bill C-5, but you and the Indigenous Resource Network view this as an opportunity. How so?
Absolutely. I think we see it as an opportunity because, I think we've seen a lot of good examples of where Indigenous communities, industry, and government have come together in terms of, fully recognizing and including Indigenous rights in terms of either ownership or co-governance, co-regulation. And we want to lean into that and make sure that that actually is kind of the precedent for, kind of moving these forward. We're also engaged kind of on a macro level as well, too, in terms of understanding world economics and opportunities. Being outpaced by developers that don't necessarily produce like we do in Canada or produce like we do with the influence of co-management of Indigenous people. And so, just trying to move lockstep with all these pieces forward and lean into examples where there is trust, there is social license, there is consent, and make sure that's standardized in terms of how we advance these major projects.
There's a lot of concern over what this legislation could mean for treaty rights, environmental approvals, the powers it will give federal ministers to approve projects. Do you share any of those concerns?
Yeah, similar, absolutely. And, I think, and rightfully so, we have a history where, our rights were railroaded for, the international interest development and things like that. Project developers were treating Indigenous people as stakeholders as part of a process. So I think a lot of this distrust has been earned. But we've also seen some incredible momentum and changes, so many changes, and Truth and Reconciliation surely kicked the door open on a lot of this understanding and reconciling and economic reconciliation, where there's different expectation, there's different understanding. I still have concerns that there's paternalism, that there's not full understanding of what constitutionally protected rights means in terms of ensuring and understanding its impacts, mitigating, removing, or accommodating and justifying. But there's also a greater understanding that, Indigenous people aren't going to bear the environmental and impacts of rights anymore without a meaningful discussion on what that looks like, whether it be on the reward side of project development through, the different ways that they can get involved, or on the risk side and just saying, no, absolutely, this is just too much of an impact to our rights. We don't want to do this. And so, yeah, we just see there's opportunity. There is players, there is people on all sides that want to see this in lockstep, true partnership where, rights are paramount to any development decision and go forward with that. I think we take a position of just being, a little more optimistic, a little more hopeful, and certainly there to kind of advocate and support that it does move in line with, in spirit of good faith, and it does progress, and we are serving the interests of Indigenous people and all Canadians.
Another concern, I guess, John, is that we don't really know what the projects are that we're talking about. The Ring of Fire is one that's often cited, but have you been hearing of some other specific projects out there?
No, I think they're starting to narrow down, and so I think there's a lot of discussion more so on the infrastructure side. So, what is the supporting infrastructure to major development projects? So not necessarily, like the mine or this or that, but I mean a major corridor, or the major, electrification of a corridor or an entryway, or major roads or major infrastructure. I think, so there's discussion around that, but what those are specifically, I don't know. I know for us, we want to see Indigenous enrichment and involvement in all of them, and prioritize the ones that advance, I think, Canada's commitments to reconciliation and commitments to Indigenous inclusion, prioritizing those the best we can. But specifically what those are, I think just more recently, they were asked the province to provide their wish lists and figure out what those are and what that process looks like. That's I think frustratingly so for every Canadian. It's like, who gets to say what those are and what are they, right?
Well, it seems like a given that the legislation will pass in the Senate this week. Do you think there's any chance, though, that things like protests and legal action tie up these projects deemed in the national interest?
There certainly is potential. Like I said, those who have not been engaged in good faith, those who have not been, the beneficiary of good engagement or participation, who have not seen that process, I could certainly see mobilizing against that, and which it isn't unfortunate, but I mean that reflects, I think, their reality and their experience, and we're all about self-determination. So if people need to advance that so be it. But I also say that there's incredible opportunity and great examples of where it's worked. I think I think people want to come to the table much more, and at the table, and I think Indigenous people, there's a seat for us now. If not sharing that table, there's certainly a seat for us to meaningfully participate. And let's explore that first. Let's exhaust that first before presuming and taking that kind of ideological position that things are out there to kind of hurt us or against us. And let's go in good faith and figure this out. And if it doesn't, let's resort to litigation and go back to building an even deeper jurisprudence against why it's not good policy or not good business to challenge Indigenous people, interests, and our rights.
John, we'll leave it there, but appreciate your perspective and time here today.
Absolutely. My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. If you have a story you want to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. You can follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Still to come here tonight, we'll give you a tour of an art installation that's about to tour Canada and the United States. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Lacey Swags shared this incredible shot of a hummingbird getting some breakfast along McMillian Lake near Cape Breton Island. Thanks for the picture, Lacey. You could send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 27 in Fredericton, 29 with rain in Halifax, 7 with showers in Kuujjuaq, rain in Nain and a high of 8. Sunny skies and 28 in Montreal, sun's out and 17 in Chibougamau, 24 in Sault Ste. Marie, 28 for Ottawa, 22 with showers in Thunder Bay, 21 and rain in Sioux Lookout. Sunny and 20 in God's Lake, 21 under sunny skies in Norway House and the Paw. Cloudy and 24 in Winnipeg, 23 and showers in Brandon. 27 with rain in Regina, 25 and rain in Saskatoon. Showers and 22 in Buffalo Narrows and Stony Rapids. In northern Alberta, 24 in High Level, 22 in Fort Chipewyan. Showers and 24 in Edmonton, 30 under sunny skies in Medicine Hat. 19 with showers in Vancouver, rain and 25 in Kamloops. 20 with showers in Prince George, Smithers and Fort Nelson. 27 in Old Crow, showers and 20 in Whitehorse. 22 in Yellowknife, 26 in Norman Wells. 10 in Sax Harbor, 19 in Paulatuck. 15 with rain in Chesterfield, 19 in Arviat, 8 in Resolute, cloudy and 13 in Joe Haven. Colorful, intriguing, sometimes even interactive. Urban installations are popping up everywhere in our cities, and we can come across them at street corners, often without knowing their story. But in this case, we definitely recognize its Indigenous roots. APTN's Kim Sullivan has more.
Regarde le jaune vert, là, c'est cool.
Ouais, vraiment.
For over a decade, Créos, a family-owned business in Quebec, promotes art and transforms public spaces into must-visit destinations.
On veut avoir puis créer des moments vraiment de réunion, que dans ce moment-là, on se concentre sur qu'est-ce qu'on vit, qu'est-ce qu'on voit, qu'est-ce qu'on entend, qu'est-ce qu'on sent.
In collaboration with an Indigenous creative team, their new urban installation offers a sensory journey through the forest. Julie Christina Pichet is Atikamekw from Wimatashi and is one of the 2 creative artistic directors on the project.
Je suis vraiment fébrile aussi que les gens puissent le vivre l'expérience de s'asseoir et de voyager à travers les rêves des 6 saisons à Atikamekw.
Wedgie Kuninut, The 6 Seasons, came to life with the help of Dave Jennis from the Wolastoqiyik Washipikuk First Nation, and in collaboration with artists Ruoma Awashish from Abedjuan, Etienne Thibault from Mastayache, and Serge Maheu. Its name, a combination of the first part of the word dreamcatcher in Atikamekw with the last part of the word in Wolastoqi. 6 giant dream catchers where, as Janice demonstrates, visitors are invited to settle in to trigger a one-of-a-kind sound and light experience.
On a une bande son pour chaque saison sur lequel on a travaillé avec un artiste de musique Innu qui s'appelle Étienne Thibault. À partir de nos visions de chaque saison, à partir de cette histoire-là, parce qu'on amène les gens en territoire, c'est ce qu'on veut.
Janice adds that these installations are an homage to the land and to our Indigenous identities.
Celui-là, il y avait beaucoup plus de billes, puis on était comme ouf.
To give life to these dreams, Janice and Pichet worked with partners like Créos, Houston First, and Init. Virginie Simon is Init's production manager.
C'est sûr que ce projet-là, on essayait au niveau des choix des matériaux de respecter aussi toute l'authenticité des cultures autochtones. Il n'était pas question de mettre de l'acier, du plastique. On est allé chercher le bois, on est allé chercher le cuir au niveau du tressage, la corde au niveau du tressage.
It was also important that the weaving technique be taught by an elder, a task Pichet's mom happily took on.
Donc, elle a transmis son savoir du tressage,
par l'accrocher et le temps. Le processus de le faire aussi, c'est pas juste un travail avec un résultat final. Il y a une énergie à mettre quand on réfléchit, on pense à nos rêves, à nos souhaits.
Pour nous, c'était une expérience incroyable de pouvoir aller apprendre vraiment les techniques de tressage authentiques puis de quelqu'un de la communauté Atikamekw.
A unique learning experience. That's what art is, and that is the ultimate goal of this installation.
Une installation comme qu'on vient de créer, tout le monde ensemble, permet cette curiosité-là, puis vraiment d'amener les gens à explorer, à se renseigner, à être, sans le savoir, s'éduquer sur certaines choses.
Like the notion that a dream catcher is more than a simple decoration.
C'est un objet symbolique, spirituel, traditionnel, très important dans notre culture. Et là, on lui redonne toute sa valeur. Ils vont peut-être avoir un petit peu plus de respect d'où viennent leurs capteurs. Est-ce qu'il a été fait par des Autochtones? Pour moi, ça, c'est important de faire réfléchir les gens puis qu'ils apprennent quelque chose à travers notre culture du capteur de rêve. Mirosquawin.
Each module represents one of the 6 Atikamekw seasons, from Sikon, pre-spring, to Pipon, winter.
J'espère que les gens vont être au rendez-vous, puis qu'on va faire aussi découvrir les Autochtones de l'Est au reste du pays, mais aussi aux États-Unis.
Wedgie Koninut is actually premiering in the United States this month and will come back to Quebec in the fall. Then, you may see this urban installation adorn a public space near you. Which one will be your favorite?
Une unité, c'est difficile de dire c'est laquelle la préférée. Presque impossible.
Kim Sullivan, APTN National News, Montreal.
Very cool. I wonder how they're going to transport them all around. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For news anytime, though, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when Creason will have your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Stay tuned. An encore presentation of Face to Face is next. Have a great night.